Everybody, good morning to you. Happy Sunday to you. Happy Super Bowl Sunday to you. I hope it's a super day for you, even you Bears fans.
Go Bears!
Yeah. Hey, I want to make sure you're aware, we got a great month. The beginning of March is several tremendous opportunities I don't want you to miss. One, the very first Sunday of March, March 5th, we're celebrating 17 years as a church. It's our 17-year celebration. Yep. It's a big deal. We got a special guest. It's going to be a special day. You don't want to miss that for sure. And earlier in that weekend, on the Friday before, so the 3rd of March, we've got Dessert with Dave, which if you're new to CCC, newer to CCC, that's a place to get to find out how to make the most of your experience here at Community Christian Church. It's a great place to ask any questions you might have. It's free, and we do provide more than dessert. We provide a whole meal, but you do need to register, and if you haven't been yet, you ought to get to that. And then that Tuesday, the first Tuesday of March, we're launching something called Bible Made Possible. So if you were around last fall, you remember we launched Bible Made Possible last fall, had a session of it, ran for 7 weeks. This one's going to run for 4. And it's a different focus than we had before, but several principles. And the idea are to give you some principles as you engage with the Bible. If you've ever been frustrated when you've read the Bible, it's so critical for us to understand and engage with the Bible regularly. And so that's what the Bible Made Possible is all about. You can register for all those things. Check them out on the website or at the Welcome Center afterwards. But make note of it. You don't want to miss it. You know, I have a friend who I grew up with. He lives in East Tennessee, and not too long ago, he launched his own pest control business. His name is Roger, and his pest control business is called Mize Pest Control. It's his last name, Roger Mize. And I called him not too long ago because I had a mouse in my house a couple years back, and I said to him, like, hey, I'm trying to take care of this rodent problem, and I've seen those, like, high-pitch whistling things where you just plug it in and supposedly it emits this high frequency pitch deal, and that annoys the rodent, and eventually they'll just leave your premises, you know, because you just plug it in. That seemed like a simple solution. Anybody ever heard of those before or tried those before? Yeah. So I call him. I'm like, hey, what do you think of these things? And he says, yeah, they don't work. It's a waste of your money. He said, if those things work, I'd be out of a job, you know. But they don't. But he has always been one to know how to deal with, you know, critters and rodents and bugs and pests and all that kind of thing. In fact, at my oldest brother, Tim, his wedding, it was an outdoor wedding and an outdoor reception in this backyard. And there happened to be this big old snake that slithered in trying to take part in the festivities, I guess. And it was causing a little bit of a ruckus, and they're like, just get Roger, you know, he knows what to do. And so Roger comes over, and he's like, oh, yeah, that's a snake, you know, whatever it was. He knew exactly what it was. He reaches down, he grabs that thing up by its tail, you know, and I don't know what he did with it. He, you know, threw it in the neighbor's yard or took it, I don't know what he did, put it in his trunk, you know, made friends. I don't know what it was. But he's always been real good with that, you know. How do you catch a snake? You don't. You call Mize Pest Control, and he'll take care of it for you there. But he's just, you know, he's known how to deal with all that stuff. Now, most of the stuff that he deals with has to do with, like, bugs and, you know, creepy crawlies and ants and all that kind of thing. But I got to thinking, he's essentially, you know, he's an exterminator. He's an executioner of sorts for the bug kingdom. You know, and he's got all these instruments of death that he uses. You know, he brings along with him sprays and chemicals and all that kind of thing. He's like the Grim Reaper for bugs, Roger is. And it got me thinking about, like, ordinary, you know, folks, the common man. Like, if we don't want to, you know, hire a pest control of some sort, what do? Well, we go and we try to buy the stuff at Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. And I got to thinking about all these different instruments of death that we would use if we didn't hire somebody like Roger. And it's very, very interesting. It's very interesting that bugs with these instruments of death will go to them voluntarily. They will choose to enter into or participate in the very things that lead to their death. Why will they do that? Well, it's because these things involve deception. They involve the promise of something, like a bug looks at them and thinks that they're desirable to the eye or good for food or something like that, but they lead to their death. For instance, you've probably seen one of these before. Check it out. You ever seen that before? Roach Motel? Yeah. And so the idea behind it is there's a little bit of food in it, and the roaches, they think that, it's going to be good for food, but it's the last meal that a roach will ever eat. Roaches end their life in that little hotel. Or how about this one? All right, you ever seen this before? Yeah, fly paper. Now, my understanding is that there's an odor that this fly paper emits, and flies think that that's a good thing. They like it, and they land there, but once they land there, they're stuck there. They essentially fly to their death. Or this one. You ever seen this one before? Yeah, one of those bug zappers. Yeah, if you've ever been outside and you've seen one of these things, there's that sound, a kind of electric kind of sound, and it's a zip, 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 or zap, 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 over and over again, and that's the sound of bugs hitting that little bug zapper. The light attracts them. They just look at that light, and they think, that's a cool-looking light. I'd like to get closer to that light. I got to get to that light, and they fly right into it, and bzz, they're gone. You may have heard about the moth. Did you hear about this moth? He goes into a podiatrist's office, and the podiatrist asks this moth, like, what's wrong? And the moth says, Doc, I just don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I can't stand my job. My marriage is falling apart. My family is exhausting. My relationship with my kids, it's in shambles. My body is breaking down. Like, Doc, sometimes it's just all too much to bear. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the podiatrist says to the moth, man, you really need some help, but you need a psychiatrist, not a podiatrist. I'm a podiatrist. Why did you come to me today? And the moth says, because the light was on. Like moths, bugs, all that kind of thing. The light attracts them, and they just look at the light, and they think, that's a cool-looking light, and I got to get closer to that light, and then they fly too close to the light, and bzz, Now, I want you to try and think like a bug for just a moment, because you'd think that after a while, bugs would wise up, right? You'd think that they'd look down, observe all the, array of, bodies littered underneath that light that have gone before him. You think some thoughtful bug would say somewhere like, wait a minute, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not just going to blindly follow my desires. I've been noticing all my friends get drawn into this, and they never come back. Like Billy's gone, and Bob's gone, and Brandon's gone, and Betty's gone, and Brumhilda's gone, And this is really bugging me. I'm waiting all week for that, man. But no bug does that, Apparently, they just say, this is so cool, the light looks so inviting, it's so warm, so welcoming, I've got to fly to the light. But it's not okay for them. And all night long, zap, zap, zap. There's a way that seems right to a bug, but in the end, it just leads to death. Only a bug would be that foolish, right? Well, not really. I'll show you one more instrument of death. Does anybody guess what this catches? We don't know from the very first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, what kind of fruit it was, but we're told that there was a tree in the Garden of Eden, and it grew fruit, and it was forbidden to eat of that tree. Genesis 3:6 says that when the woman saw the fruit from the tree, that it was good and pleasing to the eye, and it was desirable for wisdom. Zap. She took it to her husband. He also saw it as desirable, pleasing to the eye, and they ate of it. And you got to wonder, every time we read about another person who falls to temptation that just destroys their life, like destroys their relationships, rocks their world, breaks up their family, withers up their soul, you got to ask, why does it happen? Why do we choose to violate our values and voluntarily give in to what we know is going to be destructive? Why do we fly to the light? Why do intelligent people engage in foolish, dark actions that we know will be ashamed of? Well, the Bible says that at least part of the answer is that we have an enemy. And what that enemy is really, really good at is deceiving us. The Bible says in Ephesians 6, when the Apostle Paul writes to the church at Ephesus, he says, we battle not against flesh and blood, but against the powers, principalities. He says against the spiritual forces of evil. And then he urges us, he says, therefore, put on the full armor of God so you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. See, we have an enemy. It is the devil. Now, I understand, like in our culture, we're all skeptical about this whole thing. Like, is there a devil? Is there an evil one there? And it's important to understand it because we're skeptical in our culture. Sometimes we'll say, the devil, he's only involved like if the person's head is spinning around and they're vomiting green ooze and they're crawling around on the ceiling. Like we see The Exorcist and we say, yeah, maybe the devil got in there somehow, But no, the Bible teaches that we have an enemy, the devil. His fundamental identity, the evil one, is a deceiver, and his fundamental weapon is temptation. And this is why Jesus teaches us to pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Temptation is what the evil one does, and this is so important because so much is at stake. So let's think about temptation in this part of Jesus' prayer. One of the classic sections of the Bible on temptation is found in the book of 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter. And this is kind of by way of understanding and developing what it is that Jesus teaches us to pray in the Lord's Prayer, which we've been studying these last several weeks, as Ryan mentioned. Lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. In 1 Corinthians 10:6, Paul's writing about temptations that the Israelites gave into early on in their history when God was establishing them as a people. It's in the book of Exodus when he was establishing them as his people and his nation. And here's what is written. Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. And then he goes through this list. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, and then he gives what happened to them. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and then he tells what happened to them. We should not test the Lord, as some of them did, and he again explains what happened to them. And don't grumble, as some of them did. These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So, if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has seized you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you're tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. Now, this verse 13 here, if we go back to the slide before, it's one of the central statements in the Bible about temptation, and I want us to think about this, make some observations that come out of it. And the first one is, again, from this first sentence here in verse 13, no temptation has seized you except what is common to mankind. And the observation to make at this is expect temptation. You will be tempted, so don't be surprised. Don't get caught off guard. Don't be disappointed or even discouraged when it comes. When Jesus, in his prayer model that he models for us, when he says, keep us from temptation, that it doesn't mean keep us from the experience of temptation because, no human being on the face of this earth is kept from that. I mean, Jesus himself was tempted, but sometimes folks act surprised when they get tempted, but it's just part of being human. We are to pray for deliverance, for succumbing to temptation, for giving in and being destroyed by temptation. See, nobody's temptation free. And this means that your ability to resist temptation is enormously important. To identify and resist temptation, it is huge. There's a celebrated experiment in psychology, and it started several decades ago. It's been continued for many years now, but it's about resisting temptation. And the way that it works is an experimenter would leave a little kid, like a 4 or 5-year-old kid, in a room with some sort of sweet treat. M&Ms, most often marshmallows. The original was done with marshmallows. And then they'd say, hey, I'm going to leave the room, and there's one marshmallow here. If you can wait until I get back, you can have 2 marshmallows. But if you eat the marshmallow while I'm gone, well, that's the only marshmallow that you're going to get. And so it's a test to see if kids can resist temptation. Now, the original experiment, it was done, again, many, many years ago, and they divided these kids up into the, grab the marshmallow now group and the resist the marshmallow delayed gratification group as well. And it was very interesting that those who resisted the marshmallow at age 4 or 5 grew up to be more socially competent, more decisive, to have a higher level of self-esteem, less anger management problems, a lower rate of delinquency, and a lower rate of divorce than the grab, the Marshmallow Now kids, that group. So I got a question for you coming out of this. What's your marshmallow? What is it that tempts you? Where are you most vulnerable to temptation? What's your marshmallow? You know, something about this word for temptation that Jesus uses in his prayer and that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians here, it's the same word, because we kind of tend to restrict the idea of temptation to certain areas. We tend to think automatically in terms of certain categories. But that word translated temptation is also translated testing in the Bible. And the core idea of this word is allowing oneself to be torn away from God. Right? See, in the Bible, temptation is never a trivial thing. In our day, the word is often trivialized, and people will use it for certain foods and things like that. In the Bible, it's not for fattening desserts or petty indulgences. What's at stake is the human soul, someone being ripped away from God. We just saw these baptisms. That's where people are declaring, I'm going to link myself with Jesus Christ for as long as I live in this life. I'm going to follow him and follow closely with him and have a relationship with him. And temptation, that word, testing, it's all about ripping you away from that. Giving in to temptation is allowing myself to be torn away from the God who loves me. And the tempter, he's not stupid. He's not going to try to tempt you with something that's obviously destructive or repugnant to you. The most dangerous temptation you face is probably not the most dramatic one. It's the one most likely to subtly lure you away from intimacy and closeness with God. Like if you look back at 1 Corinthians 10, you'll notice Paul mentions 4 temptations there. He begins that section with 4 temptations. The first one is worshiping an idol. Pretty big deal, right? The next one in verse 7 he talks about is sexual immorality. We consider it a big deal. And then in verse 8, the temptation is testing God. It's like shaking a fist at God and saying, if you don't give me what I want, then I'm out of here. I renounce you, you know. I mean, those we would consider in a category like pretty hefty, pretty weighty, you know. Worshiping idols, sexual immorality, renouncing God. And then there's verse 9, and he says this, do not grumble. Anybody here grumble this week? Okay, forget just week, just today, right? You see, the great focus of the evil one is to tempt you to separate you from God. And whatever is most likely to do the trick, that's what he's going to use. Grumbling can be just as effective as idolatry or adultery. In fact, sometimes it can be far more dangerous because it's so subtle. I mean, the evil one, he doesn't just tempt you to do what's wrong. He tempts you to not do what's right. He wants you to not go deep with God and not do the things that in your life that God created you to do. And it may be that what the most important temptations some of us face today might be something just like laziness, you know? Because that's what's keeping you from deep prayer and deep love of God and deep trusting faith. Just laziness. Maybe the most important temptation you face is a couch and Netflix. And if you don't even know what your greatest temptation is, then good night. That's a disaster waiting to happen. That's like a ticking time bomb. You see, the evil one, he does not have power to destroy you. He is by no means the counterpoint to God in terms of power. God is all-powerful, he is all-knowing, he is all-present, he is all of those things. And the evil one is not that way. Essentially, the single power the evil one has is to tempt you. If any human being's soul is destroyed, including yours, it will be through temptation. Do you know what your greatest temptation is? What's your marshmallow? And by way of understanding this, I mean, this battle, it is the most important battle you and I might ever face, the temptation battle. Thomas Brooks, he once wrote a book called Precious Remedies Against Satan's Devices, or the Devil's Schemes. And he had all these different ways that the evil one tempts us. And he's got like 70 or so of those remedies and devices and all. But I just want to show us a couple in this temptation category to give us a sense of how this works, all right? So, for example, like, how does the evil one tempt us? How does he work this marshmallow into our lives? And here are 7 devices. And I'll kind of give you the device, and then I'll give you like the self-talk that goes along with it. And I don't have these on the screen, so, dial in here, okay? The first one is by showing the bait and hiding the hook, which means he gets you to look at the short-term pleasures of what this will do and hides from you the long-term consequences or misery of what will happen. Another one is by getting you to rationalize sin as virtue. Like you say, I'm not really greedy, I'm thrifty. I'm not really nosy, I'm just concerned. I'm not an alcoholic, I'm just social, that idea. Another is by showing us sins of other Christians, particularly Christian leaders. See, he did it, she did it, they did it. Nobody really can live the Christian life, so you just give in. Another is by overstressing the mercy of God. And so what you say to yourself is, just do it, just give into it, go down that trail. God will forgive you anyway. It's his job. That's the kind of self-talk. Another was by making us bitter over struggles. So what you say is, I'm struggling, I'm suffering, I deserve this in some sort of way. Another is by showing Christians how many bad people seem to be having great lives. So the self-talk goes, I might as well do it because it sure doesn't pay off. Playing by the rules doesn't pay off. And then finally, he says, by getting us to compare one part of our life to another. Like, look, I'm very good over here, so I'll let myself off the hook here, So, I do so much good over here, and so, it's okay if I do that. A very, very extreme example of this would be like a hitman, right? Right? Okay, so I kill people, but I'm really good to my mom, that kind of thing. You think about that. Any of these familiar to you? The sort of self-talk, the internal dialogue in your mind? Don't be unaware of his schemes. Understand what he's doing. This is what we're fighting, the evil one. So expect it. Expect it. Now, another observation is in verse 13, back to 1 Corinthians. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. So God just knows, he knows just how much you can bear. And he won't go beyond that. Now, this is a statement that's sometimes misused by Christians to talk about suffering. They'll sometimes say, to somebody, a person who's in bad pain, well, God won't let you suffer beyond what you can bear. God won't give you more than you can handle. But the Bible doesn't say that. People suffer to the point of death every day all around the world. This is about temptation, not suffering. And God knows just how much you can deal with. I don't know if you've ever had a personal trainer before. I know we've got a few personal trainers in our church here. I've had a couple in my life. The first time I ever went and hired a personal trainer, I was in my early 30s, and I wanted to be able to dunk a basketball again. There was a very brief window of time when in my early 20s, when if everything was right, I could dunk a basketball, and I wanted to have that experience again. So I go hire a trainer. I walk into the place with the trainers, this local athletic club, and I told them, I'm like, hey, I want to hire a trainer. And they took one look at me, and they said, you need Bubba. And I was like, Bubba? Who's Bubba? And now I picture Bubba as like this giant, unhappy man that no other person wanted as their trainer because he was punishing to the people that he trained, and that's why he was available. And so I was the, guinea pig there for it. Turned out not to be the case. Bubba was not an unhappy man. He actually came to church here for a good while before he moved out. But these trainers, they know more about the body and physical conditioning than I ever know. And sometimes I'd be lifting some weight, and every tiny little muscle in my scrappy little body would be screaming like, stop, enough, no more, Bubba, no more reps. And he would say to me, Dave, you can do more reps. You got 2 more reps in you, Dave. I know you do. Now, in my mind, I wanted to say bad things to him. But I would do the reps, And you know what? He was right. It was an amazing thing to me. I don't know how he knew, but he knew just how much I could handle. And I'll tell you something else. It wasn't much, all right? I could not handle very much, But God knows just how much temptation you can bear. I don't know how he knows, but he knows. And he will not allow the evil one to go beyond that point. And that is a promise from the Bible. Now, that ought to be very encouraging to everybody in here. There's no temptation that you or I face that is not filtered through God the Father's eyes and His care and His hand. You and I, we can have that hope. But there's also a sort of sobering implication, and it's this. You and I can never rationalize giving in to sin by saying, I just couldn't help myself. I just couldn't resist any further. God didn't leave that excuse open to us, and He didn't intend to. Like the Bible says in the book of James, the 4th chapter, it says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. He will flee, but you got to resist. It'll take some resistance. And so we actually have to resist. Now, you and I, we have a very, very good trainer, and he's with you all the time. And he watches you real close, and he knows just how much you can bear. But that means there are no excuses on this temptation deal. And if you've been letting yourself off the hook by just excusing yourself, saying, my circumstances are so bad, or I'm so weak, I don't have an alternative here, that is not what the Bible teaches. And it might be time to face that painful reality. One final observation, Paul says, but when you're tempted, He'll also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. And that is good news. When you are tempted, God Himself will provide some way out where you can stand so that you don't have to cave in. God will make a way. So we need to get really good at finding the way out. How do we recognize that way out in order to be delivered from temptation? Well, prayer is one of those ways. I mean, that's why Jesus tells us, instructs us, models for us to pray to God, to lean into God, to look to God, to get our attention back to God. God, help me in the midst of this. When I'm being hit with this, God, I need to get back to you. I mean, next week, we'll talk about the power that He has, and you're leaning into that and calling out for that. That's one way. But I'll tell you another way out, and it's the way that Jesus modeled for us. It's the way Jesus dealt with temptation, and it has to do with immersing our mind, immersing our life and our heart in the pages of the Bible. And I am so jealous for those of us who are part of this church to have our minds and hearts and lives just bathed in the words of the Bible. That's why Bible Made Possible might be the best step that you take in this fight that you fight, you see. And it's not so that we can carry a bunch of Bible trivia around with us or be known as someone who knows the Bible pretty well or some Bible scholar or something, but so that the way that we think and feel and understand and desire is transformed. You see, the best way to not eat a marshmallow is to eat something better. We got to eat better stuff because we're going to eat. And if we don't eat the good stuff, we'll eat the bad stuff, but we're going to eat. And we have got to consume the Word of God. I mean, just look at how Jesus handles temptation. Look at the master of dealing with temptation and finding a way out of temptation and standing up under it. The tempter comes to Jesus. Earlier in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, comes to Jesus at one of the classic moments in Jesus' life, the very beginning of His ministry, and Jesus and the evil one begin to do battle here. It's a real critical moment for Jesus. It's a time of testing. It's a time of temptation. And 3 times He is tempted by the evil one. First temptation is turn this bread into stone. He had been fasting and praying for 40 days. He was hungry. And the devil says, turn this bread into stone here. You don't have to be hungry anymore. You don't have to suffer. The second one was jump down from this temple. You'll be saved. God will save you. You can do something spectacular. God will take care of you. And the third one was bow down to me now and worship me, and I'll give you all the kingdoms. Your mission will be completed now. And 3 times when Jesus is tempted, he has a specific answer. And he begins the response the exact same way. And some of you know what that response is. What is it? It is written. He's referring back to the Word of God. He said, it is written. People don't live by bread alone. They are nurtured and live by every word that comes from God, by God's thoughts, you see. And it's written, don't test the Lord your God. Don't put Him to the test. And it's written, worship the Lord your God only. Serve Him alone. Jesus' mind was so washed in the Word, and He lived it in such reality so thoroughly that He saw right through the deception of the evil one. He said, why would I choose that? And we got to follow closely in Jesus' example. We got to get real clear on what our marshmallow is, where you're tempted to be pulled away from God, ripped apart from God. And we got to know how to fight. We got to look for the exit to stand up under it. I know in a room this size with this many people that every one of us, we wrestle with this temptation business. I know some of you are wrestling with it right now big time. And I want you to remember that God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. He will make a way out. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. And maybe you've been battling temptation for a long time, and maybe you're discouraged, and maybe the truth is the battle's not going all that well. And maybe you've not even been making much of an effort. And you may even be wondering right now, well, man, I keep failing at this. Is there enough grace for me? Is there any hope for me? Will things ever get better? Well, yeah. I mean, this isn't a forgiveness deal. It's a temptation deal. And the truth is that God, in His great resource for us, He forgives us. He loves us always because of Jesus. And so we're going to focus on Him right now. We're going to focus through communion, something we do every week. If you didn't grab those individually wrapped packets of communion in the back, has a piece of bread, reminds us of Jesus' body given for us. Has some juice in it, reminds us of Jesus' blood spilled for us. And we can focus on Him. Maybe use this time to cry out to Him, whatever that temptation is. Say, God, help me with this. This is what I'm facing. Maybe just thank Him. Let's spend some time looking to Jesus, who has a wealth of resource for us. Let's celebrate communion together.